Today on Mother Mayhem.
It is not about expecting perfection from yourself or from the other person. And it is sure as hell not about skipping the nervous system work in favor of just talking it through. In fact, some of the deepest healing happens when you step back, regulate, and then come back to the connection with presence instead of panic. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the podcast for daughters of narcissistic and emotionally limited mothers. And I'm your host, Heather Gray. Quick question for all of you. Have you had a chance to check out mayhemdaughters.com yet? It went live only last week, but I've been pretty excited about it. It is now the home for everything Mayhem, the podcast, the guides, and all of the resources you need to support you in your healing. And I am so gosh darn proud of it. I'd love to hear what you've been thinking about it. And that means you can now email me anytime over at heather@mayhemdaughters.com. So today, daughters, I want to build up on the conversation we had last week. Last week, I walked all of you through a conversation that hopefully helped you understand why you feel the way you do. Now, the conversations around healing and trauma tend to feel like they have a gazillion threads tied to them. And then when one gets pulled, something else gets pulled, and everything ends up all knotted up. For a lot of you, it likely feels like an endless game of whack-a-mole. You know that kids' game at arcades where one thing pops up, you bash that thing in, and another thing ends up popping up? Healing can just feel so tedious, so complicated and hard and heavy. And sometimes it is all of those things. And sometimes it's more of those things. But also, sometimes with just a little bit of clear context, everything you're managing can make a little bit more sense to you. And that's what I hope we did last week. And if you haven't yet listened to 105 yet, I really think you should go back and give that one a listen first, because that built the foundation on the conversation I'm going to continue with all of you today. So last week, I dug in with all of you about how trauma and the nervous system shape your inner world and what healing can look like when you start to build a better relationship with yourself. This week, I want to help you all zoom your lenses a little bit more outward, because for so many of you daughters, the trauma you lived through didn't just impact how you see yourself. It impacted how you connect with others. But here's what I want to say right at the top. This is such an incredibly nuanced conversation, and it is one that is deeply, incredibly vulnerable. When we just have shit going on with ourselves, it is allowed to be private. No one needs to know or be inconvenienced if we're struggling with something. But inside of relationships, we immediately end up losing that privacy and that protection. And that is why there is so much vulnerability, because the things we struggle with end up being on display, and who we are and how we move through the world end up becoming open to judgment, interpretation, misunderstanding. And not every daughter is going to struggle in relationships in the same way. And some daughters don't even struggle at all. Some of you are in really loving, secure partnerships. Some of you have meaningful friendships, fulfilling work relationships, deep connections with your kids. Others, well, some of you don't. Or perhaps you've figured out one kind of connection. So maybe romantic partnerships, but you haven't figured out friendship. Or maybe you know friendship and family relationships, but you haven't quite figured out how to connect with your larger community. Those things can still feel hard, confusing, and painful. And that's what I want to be talking to all of you about today. how the mother wound can shape your relational patterns and how you can begin to stretch your capacity so that you can relate differently. So, here's what we're going to talk about: what we actually mean when we say relational trauma. I touched a little bit on it last week, and we're going to talk about it more today. How it can end up showing up in your attachment patterns, your nervous system, and in your everyday relationships. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why healing relational trauma requires some kind of relationship. And how do you do that without just absolutely positively overwhelming the crap out of yourselves? And finally, I want to start working with you on how you all can start practicing what I'm going to call micro movements. Those little steps to build connection that you can do, like that old inchworm we've been talking about, that you can do without abandoning your nervous system in the process. So, whether or not you're someone who is deeply relational but also exhausted, or someone who's more comfortable in solitude but you're longing for that kind of safe connection, hopefully you will find that this is a conversation for you. And I hope all of you see yourselves someplace in it. So let's start with this phrase I've been using: relational trauma. Because if you grew up with a narcissistic or emotionally limited mother, this is the kind of trauma you most likely experienced. But what does it really mean? Relational trauma happens when the people who were supposed to love, nurture, and protect you were also the source of harm, neglect, or emotional chaos. And it is never going to be just about one event when we have this kind of conversation. It's about a pattern of unsafe, unreliable connection. So it's not just that your mom yelled at you or criticized you or ignored your feelings even. It's that those things kept happening and they didn't get repaired. No one said ever, "I see that I hurt you." No one helped your nervous system come back to safety. So your nervous system adapted. You might have learned to shut down, to shapeshift, to self-abandon, or to overfunction to keep the peace. And those adaptations, while they were necessary for your survival, became the patterns that you ended up carrying into all of the relationships that came next. For example, if you were constantly criticized or shamed, you might expect rejection as a default and then become either overly accommodating or perhaps emotionally walled off as a result. If you had to manage your mom's emotions, you might find that you lose yourself entirely in relationships and that you're always focused on making the other person feel okay. Then, if love was conditional for you based on your performance, your appearance, your behavior, you might end up believing that the real you isn't lovable, just the curated version of you. And because all of this happened in your first relationships, your foundational ones, your brain and your body don't always know that it's safe to relate differently now. So even when the people around you today are nothing like your mom, that is relational trauma, when your nervous system has learned to associate closeness with danger and safety with distance or control. And again, that it doesn't mean that every daughter is going to struggle in the same way. Some of you might be able to show up in healthy relationships and still carry traces of these patterns deep inside yourself. Others of you, it's more of a present day struggle. Relationships end up always feeling confusing, exhausting, or even scary. That's why I want to talk to you all about it today. Not to diagnose your connections, but to help you better understand yourself inside of them. Relational trauma doesn't just stay in your childhood. It follows you into the way you connect, attach, respond, and protect yourself in every kind of relationship. And I want to show you what that might actually look like. So, in some relationships, you might find that you feel anxious when someone pulls away, even slightly, even just a little bit. Or you might find yourself starting to overfunction just to fix it. You might shut down the moment as soon as any kind of conflict arises because conflict has always felt like danger and it has never, ever felt like repair. Or you might constantly wonder, am I too much? Am I not enough? Even when the person in question has done nothing to suggest either of those things to you. You might sabotage or retreat from intimacy because vulnerability ends up feeling so threatening and exposing for you, despite the fact that you might even want and crave connection. You might end up recognizing that you avoid telling people when you're hurt or upset because you don't want to be a burden or you don't want to risk being abandoned. And then you find that you keep showing up for others even when they don't reciprocate because you don't want to lose that connection. You sometimes might find, for example, that you leave before you're left, or you might convince yourself that you're fine without any kind of close relationships, even though there's a part of you that deeply, deeply longs to be known, seen, and understood. And if you're a parent, your child's, and we've talked about this on the show too, right? Your child's big emotions might feel like they're too much, or they might make you feel like you were the one who's out of your depth because no one ever helped you hold your big feelings when you were growing up. So you have no idea how to hold their big feelings. You might find yourself in this pattern of constantly overcorrecting, giving your child every single thing you didn't get while feeling emotionally depleted and bottomed out, and yet still find yourself wondering if any of that is enough. And then you might find that you swing between wanting to protect them from absolutely everything and then freezing when they need you because you don't have any kind of blueprint or map or roadmap of what to do next. So then what ends up happening is you always feel like you're doing it wrong because the only thing you know is that you're trying to do the exact opposite of whatever it was your mothers did. And sometimes that means that you end up managing and struggling to manage that pendulum in an effort to be that exact opposite with your mom. And then there's other kinds of relationships involved in this too. We have your work, we have your community. So you might find, for example, that you keep quiet in meetings or inside of group settings, even when you know that you have something valuable to say. You might find that you get really intensely activated at the slightest criticism, even when someone corrects you gently, because feedback is wired in your body to feel like shame. So you overextend, you take on too much, and then you end up feeling resentful, but you don't say anything because you're so gosh darn used to being the strong one, the helper. Ask me how I know. None of this means that there's something wrong with you or that you're incapable of acting in healthy ways inside of relationships. But what it does mean is that you have been relating from survival mode. You're trying to stay safe inside of connection, but the strategies that you had to learn in childhood likely aren't working for you in adult relationships. And the really tricky part here is that sometimes you can't even tell what is an actual trauma response or what's a boundary. You're not always sure of trusting what might be your intuition versus your fear. Sometimes you can't tell the difference between your gut and your trauma brain. And this is what makes it so hard to know what's not a good fit for you versus what is a nervous system reflex. And that's why, just like we walked through last week, we need to invite your nervous systems into this conversation too. Nervous system awareness is so incredibly important here. And it's something we're only just beginning to discuss when it comes to relationships. And I'm dating myself again, guys, because I got my training for a lot of this back in 1994 to 1998. And then I got what I call my wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, master's degree. And that was only a year later in 1999 when I was only 22. And man, oh man, do I wish someone had just told me to wait on that and get some experience first. But alas, not so much. And while we certainly knew back then that trauma dysregulated systems, and while we understood a lot about attachment theory, no one was talking about the nervous system back then. Or maybe I just slept through those classes. But this is new information for a lot of us, including me. And I believe a lot of us practitioners are still behind the eight ball on understanding all of this and in helping our clients with it. And this is my best stab. Brene Brown calls it her shitty first draft. Hopefully this is all a little bit better than my shitty first draft. But this is my best stab at this conversation, and still wholeheartedly 100% here. I am still a work in progress on it myself. And here is what I've come to learn and believe, and what I want to help all of you better understand too. The work and this conversation isn't just about being better at relationships. It is about feeling safer inside of yourselves so you can show up in your relationships differently in ways that feel better and are more aligned with you, who you are, and how you move through the world. So first, I want to remind you about our conversations that we've had on the show before about attachment styles. And this essentially becomes how your mother wounds ended up shaping how you connect with others. You've heard me use these terms before: anxious, avoidant, disorganized, secure. Because for those who grew up with relational trauma, like you daughters, these styles are not random. They were your adaptations. They were your nervous system's best guess at how to stay safe in relationships that didn't offer you consistency, attunement, or repair. So let's quickly make sure we're all on the same page with these definitions. When we talk about anxious attachment, we're talking about those of you who learn that love can disappear at any moment in time. You learn to stay hypervigilant. You might find yourself to be someone who analyzes every single text message, every pause, every shift in tone, and you often worry that you're too much, so you work overtime to be lovable. You might fawn, overfunction, or panic at the idea of someone pulling away. And inside your nervous system, this usually looks like fight or flight on a relational level. Your body's trying to do something to prevent abandonment. Some of you will struggle with avoidant attachment. You learn that needing people only led to disappointment, shame, or punishment. So you stop needing people. You protect yourselves by staying distant, self-sufficient, and sometimes emotionally shut down. Vulnerability never feels safe. It feels like exposure. Inside your nervous systems, this can tend to track as freeze. It's a shutdown response aimed at shutting down intimacy before it has a chance to hurt you. Then we have where I think most of you daughters likely fall. Most people, in fact, I would say, trauma related or not. I think a lot of you struggle with what is called disorganized attachment. You want closeness, but closeness has hurt you before. You fear abandonment, but connection doesn't quite feel safe. So you ping-ponged. You went from chasing to retreating to loving to pushing away. And if that sounds a little bit familiar, it's not because there's something wrong with you. or you're broken or damaged in some way. It's because your nervous system simply never had any consistent strategy for safety. So you were winging it all the time. And that is why we call it disorganized attachment. So you fawn, you flee, you freeze, you fight because your system's doing absolutely everything it can to protect you, even when it's super confusing. And that confusion makes so much sense to me. It isn't your fault, it's that trauma response. And it has a purpose. And then lastly, we have what we call secure attachment. And this is what we are all working together to help you get yourselves a little bit closer to. This is when healing is marked by not that perfect Pollyanna hallmark kind of connection. It is about feeling safe, being present inside of connection with someone else or with other people. You feel comfortable asking for what you need without panic. You trust that love doesn't require performance. That safety can come with securely attaching to another person. And for a lot of you daughters, that experience doesn't come naturally. And of course it doesn't, honestly. But I want all of you to know that it's possible. And I hold so much hope for all of you in this area. Even if you didn't start out with secure attachment, you can build something that us psychobabblers like to call earned security. I really hate this phrase. But you get it through healing, through practice, and an experience of safety inside of relationships. So some of you at any point may have learned, or maybe you were told that your attachment styles are something that are fixed and that they're locked into your wiring. But everything we're learning about trauma healing through the nervous system these days actually is telling us otherwise. And I really hate that it's called earned. I hate it so much. I really don't get why it was named this, but it feels like it plays right into this trauma story that so many of you are trying to disconnect from. But it's called earned because it reflects the process of getting there, not your worthiness. It's not about earning love or earning safety because you were so undeserving before. It's about building secure attachment through intentional repair, reflection, and then repeated experiences of emotional safety. Often then doing that obviously on repeat. And now the term here, it came out of research and it is not mine. Specifically, there's this woman, her name is Mary Main, and she had a bunch of colleagues working with her on it. But they started to notice that some adults who had difficult or insecure childhoods still did show capacity for secure, coherent connection in adulthood. And these people don't get there by accident. They got there by meaning making through relationships that felt safe, felt attuned, through the healing work that allowed them to rewrite the story and to update their nervous systems. And then if you guys like going down the psychobabble rabbit holes, we have Dan Siegel and also Diane Poole Heller is another one. Can you tell everyone I have been doing my reading and I don't even have a licensing exam coming up. I am just learning this shit for all of you. And they have been doing the work to continue this forward. And they have been illustrating and showing how this earned security, God, I hate this phrase, but how this earned security comes from both internal work, and that's the work of understanding your patterns, regulating your body, external support like therapy or group or online communities for daughters, or safe relationships. So while the term lands funny for me, what it really does point to is why I hold so much hope for all of you, that your early experiences do not have to define your future ones. And I pulled out all the research so you wouldn't think I was just pulling that out of my ass. You are not doomed to repeat the past. I promise you that. Secure attachment isn't something that only some people get to have. It's something you can grow toward even when you didn't start there. And then what does that feel like inside of your nervous systems? This is that psychobabble word. I use it sometimes. I tend to end up saying calm in your bodies or something that feels a little more Heather, but this is what regulation feels like. This is what it feels like to feel safe inside your body, even when the relationships you're involved in get a little bit messy. Why are we going down this relationship psychobabble lane? Here's the thing. I just got totally self-conscious because I have a client who told me that apparently here's the thing is one of my phrases. And Clark always says that, it's one of my phrases. So in any case, I digress. Here's the thing. The point of naming these things is not to label yourself. It's to help you understand why you show up the way you do. And then to notice that these patterns are your adaptations. They're not your identity. Your attachment style is not a personality flaw. It's a map for you of where your safety used to live or where it didn't live in your earliest relationships. And now you get to create new maps that are shaped by safety, not by survival. And yep, that is what we're doing inside of Mayhem Daughters. That's the secret to how the sausage is getting made behind the scenes, my friend. In both of our weekly therapy groups and our online community, these are the spaces I specifically designed, not to just talk about healing, but to actually practice it. Because trauma wires you for protection, but healing is what ends up wiring you for connection. This is where that newfangled term we're all learning, earned security, begins to take root. Not through these picture-perfect Hallmark relationships or some light dawning over Marblehead overnight change, but through repeated experiences of being seen, being respected, being emotionally safe. That is what rewires the nervous system. And that is how new relational experiences and new associations start to get built. So if you're ready to try something different, to show up as you are and to practice being in community in a way that does not cost you your peace, this is your invitation to join us. We meet weekly in the Mayhem therapy groups. We hold space for each other every day in our trauma-informed community, Mayhem Daughters. And yes, you get to learn all about that. Just like I said at the start of the show, all of that is now easily available to you over at mayhemdaughters.com. And I will, of course, remind you of that link in the show notes, but yay for us, we actually have a link now that's easy to remember. But I want to continue on, if you don't mind, so that we can dig a little bit more into your nervous system inside of relationships. And I could also call this the part of all of this that isn't your fault. Because here's what I really need all of you to take in. You aren't overreacting. You're not being needy. You're not being emotionally immature. You are none of the things you think you are. You have a nervous system that learned to survive relationships when they weren't safe. And you have heard me say a gazillion times at this point, your nervous systems have one job, and that, you can say it with me, and that is to keep you safe. Your nervous systems are always scanning, assuring you of your safety, warning you of a potential threat. So, in the context of relationships, your nervous system's looking for, can I be honest here? Will I be punished if I say the wrong thing? Am I too much right now? Is this person drifting away? And most of that scanning largely happens subconsciously. You're not even thinking about it. Your body's just reacting, and it's fast, and it's usually most often based on past dynamics, not your present reality. And this is why something super small, like your partner just suddenly going quiet, or a friend not texting you back, or your child's tantrum can set off this huge ass wave of emotion, because your body doesn't just see the moment. It ends up seeing a pattern that ends up feeling like danger. And inside of a relationship or a connection, if it doesn't feel safe, we end up smack dab back into the 4 F's: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So you fight, you lash out, you raise your voice, you get defensive, you try to regain control, or you flight, you withdraw, you avoid, you change the subject, you leave emotionally, or you leave physically, or some of you go frozen, you freeze, you go numb, you can't think clearly, and then you find yourselves dissociating in mid conversation, or you fawn. You soften your voice. You apologize for absolutely, positively everything. And you do whatever you need to do and agree to do to keep the peace. And right about now in my spiel is usually when a daughter in a panic asks me, so this means I'm like my mother, because my mother fought. She abandoned. She disconnected. So are you telling me I'm like her? No, 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 no. I am telling you that you learned protection strategies. It means you learned to protect yourselves when it wasn't safe. But no, it does not mean that you have now become your mother. But don't just believe me because I said so. I am not blowing smoke here again. So let me explain this super clearly so you can really all hear me on this. Your mother used those behaviors to control everyone else. You use them to protect yourself. And that is a difference that is critical, and it matters. When your mom lashed out, shut down, manipulated the shit out of you, it wasn't coming from a place of fear that she was unsafe. It was often a strategy to dominate, to deflect, to avoid accountability. Her nervous system might have been dysregulated, but her behavior was rooted in self-preservation at someone else's expense. You, on the other hand, are trying to navigate connection while managing a system that still doesn't fully believe that connection can be safe. You fawn because you don't want to be abandoned. You freeze because your body isn't sure it's okay to speak. You fight because you're afraid no one's going to hear you otherwise. You leave because staying has always felt so dangerous before. And that is not the same thing as becoming her. And I know that some of this might sound like semantics for all of you, but this is so really important, and I need you to get it, because this is where I hold all of my hope for all of you. Your bodies did what they were wired to do to survive. And healing does not mean pretending that you never go to those fighting or dysfunctional places. It means recognizing when you do and slowly learning how to choose to do something different, something safer, something connected. And that, my friends, is what your mothers never bothered to do, because they simply didn't want to. You can't punish yourselves or beat yourselves up into becoming more secure. You can start to practice safety in spaces where it is actually available. That's what rewires you. That's how you begin to build earned security. And that is how you become you, not her. Ooh, oh my goodness. All my rants, all my TED Talks. Are you guys still with me? Ooh, deep breaths, everyone. That was a lot. Let's just pause here for a second. This is probably stirring up a lot of you. For many of you, you're probably managing memories, realizations, connections, and puzzle pieces coming together. You might be feeling a heaviness in your chest or a knot in your stomach, or maybe you've gone a little bit numb. Let's not rush past it. Let's just be with it. I want to practice something with you in real time. For lack of a better word, I am going to call it an integration moment, because that is what I want to help all of you with right here in this moment. Integrating what it is we're talking about. Connecting your heads to your hearts so you can connect with what we're talking about, and also with the hope that I'm holding for all of you. So, heads up, if you're driving or otherwise occupied, probably a good time to pause the podcast and come back to it when you can take in this experience, because I have got to get you out of your heads with this one. Part of my job is to teach you all of this, but I also have to help you feel all of it. That is what's going to increase your sense of safety, connecting with yourself and then with other people. So right now, I'm going to ask that you take a moment to check in with your body. Oh, all right. Are you holding your breath? Are your shoulders tight? Do you maybe feel buzzy, blank, tender, or guarded? No fixing, no judging, just notice. And if it feels okay, take one slow breath. Let it soften your jaw. Let it settle your shoulders, even if just a little. This is a small example of integration, of getting yourself grounded and of connecting more to yourself. It's not thinking your way through. It's letting your body know, I am safe enough to pause, safe enough to stay inside of this moment. And now that you took that deep breath, I want you to remember that you can return to it whenever you need to. You can always get grounded, and you can always return to yourself. And now I want to bring you back to our conversation. Here's what I need you to understand next. Relational trauma needs to be healed inside of a relationship, but not just any relationship. And sometimes when you're a daughter whose earliest relationships were the source of harm, this ends up sounding like a trap, because you might end up thinking, that's the last place I feel safe. I tried and I got hurt again. I can't trust anyone. And I get that thinking. It makes sense that your system would want to avoid what it is associated with pain. But here's the truth that can change everything. You were wounded in connection, and you need new, safe connection to rewire what your body believes about other people, about love, about connection, and yes, about yourself. So why can't we heal alone? Well, You can make a lot of progress on your own. You can journal, you can read, you can do your inner work, you can sure as hell listen to this podcast. Some of you I know listen to it on repeat, and you can learn how to name your patterns, but you can't practice feeling safe in connection if you never experience connection, because your nervous system doesn't update through insight. Your nervous system updates through something the psychobabblers like us call co-regulation. When someone else stays steady while you are trembling, while you speak your truth, while you mess up, and they still stay. That's what creates the real shift. Not just, I know I'm worthy, but I stayed in the room. I said what was true, and I was still met with care. That is what heals relational trauma, and what healing inside of a relationship can actually look like. It is not always some big breakthrough moment in a deep, intense relationship. It often starts in slow, small, low stakes, safe enough moments. You might recognize it with something like you say no to something and you find that you don't have to over explain, and the person accepts it. You open up about one little thing that's vulnerable and you're met with empathy. You get activated, but instead of ghosting or fawning, you take up space and you come back. You show up in a relationship, in a friendship, or, any sort of connection without pretending, and someone sees you clearly. These are the micro moments that teach your nervous system a new story. I can be connected and safe. I don't have to disappear to be loved. I can repair instead of retreat. And if I'm going to walk all of you through what healing looks like inside of a relationship, I think I'm at least a little bit obligated here to tell you what healing inside of a relationship is not. It is not about forcing yourself to stay connected when you're dysregulated. It is not about staying in unhealthy dynamics for the sake of working it out. It is not about expecting perfection from yourself or from the other person. And it is sure as hell not about skipping the nervous system work in favor of just talking it through. In fact, some of the deepest healing happens when you step back, regulate, and then come back to the connection with presence instead of panic. This is where the trauma patterns can begin to shift for all of you, not through big, whopping declarations, but through small acts of truth that are held with care and consistency. So, how do you build capacity for safe relationships? You don't need to go out and fix every single relationship in your life. You don't need to suddenly become securely attached and emotionally available and perfectly regulated. You just need to start noticing. When am I in protection mode? When does my system say connection equals danger? And can I stretch just a little bit? Not force anything, but a gentle stretch. And that stretch might look like naming your needs without apologizing, letting someone in just one layer or one ring of the spider web closer, sitting with the compliment that someone offers you instead of automatically deflecting it, repairing after a misstep without going into a shame spiral. And why does all of this feel so incredibly hard for all of you? Because your body still remembers the version of connection that hurt you. And that isn't your fault. But it does end up being your work. And I want to be clear, you don't have to be doing this all at once. You get to go slowly. You get to make mistakes. You get to build your capacity over time. You didn't learn disconnection in a day, and you won't unlearn it in a day either. But every moment of nervous system informed connection is a new vote for a different story. And you, daughters, are allowed to write one. And here's something really important I need you all to know. Building connection doesn't have to start with sharing your absolute deepest wounds or your full story. It can begin with something much smaller, a simple gesture, a moment of presence. You might say, "That resonated with me," or "I feel that too." You might share a favorite book, respond to a comment, or ask someone a thoughtful question. I like to think of things like this as low stakes. They let you practice without exposing you to more vulnerability than you can hold in the moment. And these low stakes examples are really good opportunities. They're how you begin to stretch your capacity without overwhelming your nervous system. And when you do share something, anything, pay attention to how it feels and lands in your body. Does the person meet you in kind? Do they seem interested and interesting? Do they ask follow-up questions? Or do they respond and reflect back with something meaningful? These aren't just signs of connection. Those are the signs of safety. So no, you do not have to connect by rehashing your past or proving or performing your pain. You are allowed to lead with curiosity, with lightness, even with joy, because connection isn't just about surviving together. It's about learning to be present in the company of others. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to stay open to the possibility that connection can feel different now, that it can feel good, and that you are allowed to want that. You are already doing that work by being here, by listening in and opening yourselves up to these new thoughts and ideas about connection. And that's good. You can absolutely, positively let that be enough for today. All of you are in this community of women around the world who are managing these really big and vulnerable things together. And I, for sure, most definitely, am always, always, always in it with you too. Bye for now. If you felt seen in this episode, I want you to know the work doesn't end here. What we're talking about on the podcast, relational trauma, mother wounds, identity, and healing, was never meant to be worked through alone. That's why I've built an entire ecosystem of support around Mother Mayhem, and you can now find all of it over at mayhemdaughters.com. You'll learn more about our weekly support groups, which meet Tuesdays at noon and Thursdays at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. These aren't trauma dumps. They're spaces for real connection, mutual support, and movement making. You'll also find our private online community, Mayhem Daughters, where the conversation continues between episodes. It's not social media. It's something safer, deeper, and intentionally designed to support your healing. And if you're not quite ready to share in a group but want my eyes on your story, I offer one-on-one Mayhem consultations as well. You can learn more about all of it over at mayhemdaughters.com. If this show has helped you and you want to help keep it ad-free, you can do that through the sponsor link on the website. But I also want to be clear. If you're already a member of group in the community or you've worked with me one-on-one, you are already supporting the show. There's nothing more I'm asking of you. If you have a story or reflection of your own, I'd love to hear it. You can send a message or a voice note of 10 minutes or less to heather@mayhemdaughters.com. There's no mayhem without your stories or your questions. And if you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares make a real difference, and I hope you'll consider doing so. And lastly, a heartfelt thank you to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's been in it with me since 2016 and somehow always knows what I meant to say, even when I don't quite say it right. This isn't just a show, it's a community, and you're already a part of it. I'm so glad to have you in it with me.